They say love is blind. But sometimes, love isn't just blind. It's a carefully crafted illusion. A trap designed to keep its victim in the dark until it's far too late. Claire Morgan had once believed in love. She had once believed in him. But now, standing in the middle of the woods, staring at the horror buried beneath the cold earth, she realized the man she had devoted her life to was nothing more than a monster in disguise. For years, Claire and Daniel had been the kind of couple that made others jealous. Or at least that's how it looked from the outside. He was charming, successful, and magnetic, the kind of man who could walk into a room and make everyone want to be near him. She was beautiful, kind, and fiercely loyal. Their love story was the kind that people admired, one filled with romantic vacations, candlelit dinners, and spontaneous gestures that made Claire believe she had found her perfect match. Daniel was a corporate attorney, sharp-witted and powerful, with a reputation that made men respect him and women admire him. Claire, a talented interior designer, had built a successful career of her own, turning ordinary homes into breathtaking masterpieces. Together, they were the image of wealth, status, and effortless happiness. Their home was a modern masterpiece, perched on the hills overlooking the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed their world in golden sunlight each morning. Friends envied them, neighbors admired them, and strangers assumed they were living a fairy tale. But fairy tales don't have locked drawers in home offices. Fairy tales don't have whispering phone calls that end the moment you walk in. Fairy tales don't have midnight messages from unknown numbers. And on a cold, rainy night, Claire saw what she was never meant to see. Daniel had left his phone on the kitchen counter, careless, distracted. As she walked past, the screen lit up with a new message. Unknown number, it's done. No more loose ends. He won't be a problem. Claire froze. Her fingers trembled as she stared at the words, her mind racing to make sense of them. What was done? Who wouldn't be a problem? A sickening feeling twisted in her stomach. She tried to ignore it. She told herself she was overreacting, that she was imagining things. But the feeling wouldn't go away. The next morning, Daniel left the house early, dressed in dark jeans and a sweatshirt, so unlike his usual polished suits. Claire followed him. Something inside her whispered that this was her only chance to know the truth. She kept a safe distance as he drove down an empty road, far away from the city. The trees grew thick, the sky darker. She gripped the steering wheel, watching as he pulled over near an abandoned lot. Then she saw it. Daniel stepped out of the car and walked toward a clearing. In his hands was a shovel. Claire's heart pounded. She watched, horrified, as her husband began digging. The ground was already disturbed. He wasn't burying something new. He was just making sure it stayed buried. Her breath caught in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to turn the car around and pretend she had never seen this. But she couldn't, because if she left, she would never know what or who was beneath the dirt. She waited until Daniel was gone before stepping forward, her body trembling with adrenaline. The scent of damp earth filled her lungs as she dropped to her knees and began to dig. Her fingers clawed through the soil, each handful bringing her closer to the truth. The dirt was thick and heavy, clinging to her skin like it wanted to keep its secrets hidden. And then, her nails scraped against something cold. A hand, pale, lifeless, fingers frozen in a final, desperate reach. Claire gasped, stumbling backward, her vision blurred. Her stomach twisted violently, bile rising in her throat. This couldn't be real, but it was. Daniel had killed someone, and now she had proof. But who was the victim? Why did Daniel kill them? And more importantly, was she next? She needed evidence. She needed to be smart. That night, while Daniel was in the shower, Claire did something she never thought she would do. She unlocked his forbidden drawer. Inside, she found stacks of cash, a gun, and a folder. Her breath caught when she flipped it open. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Some of the pictures were of men in suits, their faces crossed out with red ink. Others were of her. Claire's blood ran cold. One picture showed her sitting by the fireplace, reading a book. Another showed her jogging through the park, her ponytail swaying behind her. But one was taken just days ago. She was sitting at their kitchen table, completely unaware, sipping her morning coffee. Her face was circled in red. Her hands trembled. Her husband wasn't just a liar. He wasn't just a killer. He was planning something. She knew she had to act fast. The next night, she set the trap. She cooked his favorite meal, steak, mashed potatoes, red wine. The kind of dinner she would have made when she still believed in him. Daniel sat across from her, smiling, completely unaware. He lifted his glass, took a sip. Seconds later, his expression shifted. His body tensed. His hand trembled as he set the glass down. What did you? His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Claire leaned forward, her voice calm, cold. You taught me well, darling, but I learned to play better. Daniel collapsed. Not dead, just sedated. The police were already on their way. She had sent them everything, the photos, the messages, the evidence. Every dirty secret he thought he could bury. Minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows as the door burst open. Officers swarmed in, guns raised. Claire didn't move. She just watched. Daniel's body was limp as they pulled him to his feet, his eyes locking onto hers. For the first time, he looked afraid. And then it was over, or so she thought. Days later, as she sat in the courtroom, listening to the judge read Daniel's guilty verdict, she felt relief flood her body. It was finally over, until a lawyer approached her. Without a word, he handed her a small envelope. Frowning, Claire opened it. Inside was a picture of her, taken yesterday. Claire's blood ran cold. Daniel had been in prison. So who? Her breath hitched as she realized. This wasn't over. Not even close. Justice isn't always what it seems. Sometimes, it's a fleeting illusion. An empty promise whispered in a courtroom. Claire Morgan had learned this the hard way. She had watched him fall. She had seen the police drag him away, his wrists bound in cold steel, his eyes burning with a silent threat. She had heard the judge's voice as the guilty verdict rang through the courtroom. And yet, he was back. Daniel Morgan stood in their kitchen, pouring himself a glass of wine, as if the last few months had never happened. Claire could barely breathe. Her body was frozen in place, her mind spinning, trying to make sense of the impossible. How was he here? Daniel took a slow sip of his drink, exhaling with satisfaction before finally meeting her gaze. You're quiet, sweetheart. Not happy to see me. Claire's fingers gripped the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. Her heart pounded in her ears. How? Her voice was barely a whisper. Daniel chuckled. How did I get out? Oh, Claire, you should know by now. Money can buy anything, even justice. A sickening wave of dread washed over her. Of course, his lawyer, the brilliant, ruthless man who had sat in the courtroom, picking apart every piece of evidence she had handed to the police, twisting every damning detail into something innocent. A misunderstanding, the lawyer had called it. Fabricated evidence, he had argued. My client was framed by a woman desperate for revenge, he had insisted, and the jury had believed him. Now Daniel was free, and he had come home. The glass in his hand caught the kitchen light as he swirled the deep red liquid inside. He looked so calm, so relaxed, like this was just another evening. But Claire knew better. This wasn't a homecoming. This was a warning. You tried to destroy me, Daniel said, his voice smooth, almost amused. He tilted his head, studying her. I should be angry. I should hate you. He set the wine glass down on the counter and took a step toward her. Claire's body tensed. But I don't. His voice was soft, deceptively soft. Because I understand, Claire. You were scared, confused. You didn't know what to do. So you panicked. Her breath hitched. He was rewriting the narrative just like he always did, twisting reality to fit his version of events. But that's all in the past now, Daniel continued, stepping even closer. We can put this behind us. Move on. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Move on? She choked out. "Daniel, you killed someone." A slow smile spread across his lips. "Did I?" His voice was taunting, laced with amusement. "Because according to the law, I didn't." Claire swallowed hard. This was a game to him. He had won. And now she was trapped. That night, Claire lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her body stiff beneath the sheets. Daniel's presence beside her felt suffocating. She could feel his steady breathing, could hear the soft rustle of the fabric as he shifted slightly. He was so close, too close. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out of this house while she still could. But where would she go? Daniel had money, power, influence. He could find her. He could drag her back. And worse, he could punish her. For the first time in her life, Claire realized something chilling. She wasn't just living with a murderer. She was living with a man who had already gotten away with it once. And now, she was his next loose end. She turned her head slightly, glancing at Daniel in the dim glow of the moonlight. His face was peaceful, relaxed, as if he had nothing to fear, because he didn't. He had already proven that no one could touch him. Claire's fingers curled into fists. She had tried the legal way. She had tried to fight fair, and it had cost her everything. She wouldn't make that mistake again. If justice wouldn't stop Daniel, she would. Fear had a way of settling into the bones. It wasn't just in the way Claire's heart pounded when Daniel walked into a room. It wasn't just in the way she flinched at the sound of his voice, the way her body tensed every time he looked at her for a second too long. It was in the way she never truly breathed anymore. Because she knew Daniel hadn't just come back to reclaim his life. He had come back to watch her. At first, she had tried to convince herself it was paranoia. But then, she noticed the small things. The locked office drawer that was now empty. The way his phone never left his hand. The glint in his eyes whenever she spoke, as if he was studying her every word. He knew she was afraid, and he liked it. But what Daniel didn't know was that Claire wasn't just afraid. She was planning. She had spent weeks pretending to be the forgiving wife, pretending to let things go, pretending to believe the lie he had so carefully woven around them. But behind closed doors, Claire was searching. She needed something bigger than what she had found before. The body in the woods had been enough to convict him once, but the law had failed her. This time, she needed something even Daniel's money couldn't erase. She started with his past. Late at night, while Daniel slept soundly beside her, Claire scoured the internet, digging through every record, every archived article, every scrap of information she could find. First, it was dead ends, scrubbed histories, non-existent records. But then, she found something. A name. Ethan Caldwell. The name meant nothing to her until she cross-referenced it with missing person reports. Ethan had vanished 3 years ago. No trace, no leads, just gone. And then, she found something even worse. Ethan wasn't the only one. There were more, so many more. Men, women, people who had either vanished or suffered mysterious accidents. People who had, at one point, all had one thing in common. They had worked with Daniel. Claire's hands trembled as she scrolled through the names. The realization settled over her like ice. This wasn't about one murder. Daniel had been killing for years, and no one had stopped him. A cold chill ran down her spine. She had to go to the police. This was undeniable. This was bigger than any case his lawyer could twist. But Claire had waited too long, because she wasn't the only one watching. That night, Claire walked into the bedroom, forcing her expression to remain calm, her heart hammering violently in her chest. Daniel was already there, sitting at the edge of the bed, waiting. She hesitated. Something about the way he looked at her sent a spike of dread down her spine. "What's wrong?" she asked, feigning concern. Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he reached beside him and picked up a folder. He held it up for her to see, and Claire's world collapsed. It was hers. The research, the missing person files, the documents she had saved onto a hidden drive. Everything. "You've been busy, haven't you?" Daniel murmured. His voice so calm it sent nausea rolling through her stomach. Claire took a slow step back. Daniel, He moved before she could finish. 1 second, he was across the room. The next, he was inches from her, his fingers curling around her throat in a slow, deliberate grip. "You never learn," he whispered. Claire clawed at his wrist, panic exploding in her chest as his grip tightened. "You had to keep digging, had to push, even when I gave you a chance to walk away." Her lungs burned as she gasped for air. This was it. He wasn't going to let her go this time. She had fought too hard. She had seen too much. And Daniel never left loose ends. He pressed her backward, his strength overpowering hers. Her back slammed against the dresser. Her vision blurred. And then pain. A sharp, hot agony seared through her ribs. Claire sucked in a ragged breath, her hands shaking as she looked down. The knife was buried in her stomach, deep and cruel. Daniel stepped back, watching her collapse to the floor, a small, satisfied smile on his lips. "It didn't have to end this way," he murmured. Claire's world was spinning. Her fingers trembled as she pressed them to the wound, warm blood pooling between them. Everything faded. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was Daniel standing over her, calm, unbothered, like he had done this 1,000 times before. The walls were finally closing in. For years, Daniel Morgan had controlled everything. His narrative, his reputation, and the people around him. He had killed without consequence, erased his past with money and power, and manipulated the system to bend in his favor. But this time he had gone too far. Claire's body lay lifeless on the bedroom floor, her blood soaking into the carpet, the room eerily silent except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Daniel stood over her, breathing heavily, staring at the mess he had created. It was done. He had ended the one person who dared to challenge him, the only person who knew the depths of his crimes. Or so he thought. He didn't notice the small red light blinking from the corner of the room. Claire had planned for this. Even in her fear, she had known the risk, and she had prepared. The hidden camera had caught everything. Daniel wiped the blood from his hands and moved quickly, grabbing his pre-packed bag from the closet. He needed to leave before the authorities came knocking. He had friends in high places, people who could buy him time. He just needed to get out of the country before... Boom! A thunderous pounding at the front door froze him in place. "This is the police. Open the door." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. No, this wasn't happening. He turned, reaching for the gun tucked in the dresser drawer. "Daniel Morgan, we have a warrant for your arrest. Come out with your hands up." The red and blue lights flashing through the windows made his stomach churn. His mind raced for a way out, but for the first time in his life, there was none. The authorities weren't just here for Claire's murder. They knew everything. The hidden files Claire had collected, the missing persons, the secret transactions, the bodies that had never been found. It was all out, and there was nowhere left to run. Daniel's chest tightened as footsteps stormed through the house. They were inside. The bedroom door burst open, and within seconds, red laser sights danced across his chest. "Drop the weapon." His fingers twitched against the gun's trigger. His mind screamed for an escape. But this time, there was no way out. Justice had finally caught up to him. The headlines the next morning were everywhere. Daniel Morgan, the serial killer hiding in plain sight. Wife's murder exposes dark secrets of wealthy businessman. The end of a monster. How one woman brought a killer to justice. The world finally knew the truth. Claire had died to expose him, but in the end, she had won. The footage she had recorded was indisputable. The files she had saved were damning. Every secret Daniel had buried came spilling into the light, piece by piece, revealing the monster he had always been. There were no more lies to tell, no more loopholes to exploit, no more power to wield. Daniel Morgan was gone, and justice at last had been served. The world is full of people who believe they can outrun their sins, who think that power will protect them forever. But the truth is simple. No secret stays buried forever. No lie can withstand the weight of the truth. And in the end, no matter how powerful, how rich, or how untouchable a person may seem, justice always finds a way. To those who deceive, manipulate, and destroy, your time will come, and when it does, there will be nowhere left to run.